What happens when love blossoms between a soldier and a nurse amid the chaos of war? During World War II, in a world devastated by destruction, a young soldier named Tomás Bennett finds himself fighting not only against external enemies, but also against his own doubts and fears. At just 22 years old, he carries the weight of a dream to become a hero. However, the brutal reality of the battlefield makes him question the meaning of that title. Meanwhile, Clara Miller, a 25-year-old nurse, dedicates herself tirelessly to saving lives, driven by empathy and a passion for caring for others. They come from different worlds, but their lives unexpectedly intersect, giving rise to a love that defies the rules and expectations. Tom, hailing from a small town in the Midwest, has always sought a greater purpose. Growing up in a humble family, he learned the importance of hard work and responsibility from an early age. However, upon enlisting, he never imagined that war would bring him not only physical challenges, but also a profound internal conflict. Memories from his childhood, filled with dreams of heroism, now blur with the anguishing reality of the battlefield, where each day could be his last. Doubt consumes him. What does it truly mean to be a hero? Meanwhile, Clara, the daughter of immigrants, has always dreamed of helping those in need. Her determination to become a nurse led her to the front lines, where she faces pain and loss daily. Amid the chaos of field hospitals, she struggles not only to save lives, but also to find her own purpose in a world that seems to have lost hope. Each life she saves brings her closer to a profound feeling she never imagined she could have: love for a soldier she is yet to meet. The story unfolds when Tom, caught in an ambush, is wounded and finds Clara, who rescues him in a moment of extreme vulnerability. Their first contact is intense and urgent, marked by the fragility of life. In the field hospital, as Clara cares for him, they share moments that transcend physical pain. They talk about their dreams, hopes, and fears, forming a deep emotional bond that challenges the circumstances surrounding them. However, war is not kind, and soon they face challenges that threaten not only their love but their very lives. Tom must return to the battlefield, aware that the next mission could be his last. Clara, in turn, struggles against the prejudices of other soldiers and nurses who see her love as a weakness. In a devastating moment, a surprise attack separates them, forcing Clara to confront her fears and search for Tom amid the devastation. The story of Tom and Clara is a journey of love, courage, and resilience in a world that seems to be crumbling. It serves as a reminder that even in the darkest circumstances, love can blossom, defying the barriers imposed by society. As the war continued to ravage Europe, Tomás Bennett faced a grim and confusing reality. After being rescued by Clara, he physically recovered, but the emotional scars were deeper and harder to heal. Every time the sounds of explosions echoed in the distance, Tom found himself paralyzed by fear. He questioned whether he could truly be the hero he had always dreamed of being, or if instead he would become just another soldier lost amid the carnage. Clara, for her part, felt the weight of expectation. She was deeply in love with Tom, but the responsibility of caring for so many wounded left her exhausted. Many nights, after her shift at the hospital, she sat alone, reflecting on the fragility of life and the burden of her choices. With each patient that arrived, Clara remembered Tom's face and what was at stake. Yet doubts always lurked. Could she endure the pain of losing someone she loved in such uncertain times? In the hospital, other characters emerged, complicating the dynamic between Tom and Clara. There was Sergeant Mark, a comrade of Tom's who, despite his bravery, carried a shadow of distrust. Mark viewed the love between Tom and Clara as a weakness, and often warned Tom about the dangers of getting attached to someone during wartime. Having lost many friends, he believed that everything was a matter of survival. Friendship and love were luxuries that could come at a steep price. His words, although spoken with the intent to protect, only heightened the pressure on Tom, who began to question what was right and what was necessary for survival. Another important character was Nurse Helen, a strong and determined woman who had become a close friend of Clara. Helen had a painful past marked by the loss of her own love during the war. She tried to help Clara cope with her feelings, but she also had a cynical view of how love could be a trap. In the end, Clara, "This war knows no compassion," she would say. It tears away everything we have and leaves only pain. Helen's words echoed in Clara's mind, making her question whether love was worth the risk. Meanwhile, Tom was preparing to return to the battlefield. The day of departure was approaching, and he felt a knot in his stomach. Looking at Clara, he saw not only love, but also a reason to fight. Yet Mark's words hammered in his mind. Attach yourself, and you will suffer. Tom tried to convince himself that he could be strong, that he could fight and come back to Clara. However, uncertainty consumed him. On the day Tom left, Clara made sure to be by his side. She looked into his eyes and saw the determination mixed with fear. Come back to me, she pleaded, her voice trembling. Promise that you will come back. Tom nodded, but deep down, he knew that war made no promises. The separation was brutal. In the days that followed, Clara threw herself into her work, trying not to think about Tom. However, every injured soldier that arrived reminded her of him. The memories were a mix of joy and pain. Whenever there was an attack, her heart raced, and she wondered if Tom was safe. The fear of losing someone she loved made her question her own beliefs. After all, was love a weakness that made her vulnerable, or was it the only thing that could give meaning to that devastation? Meanwhile, at the front, Tom faced his own demons. The fighting was intense, and death lurked at every corner. Each time a bomb exploded nearby, he remembered Clara's words and the hope she represented. But the pressure to not show weakness consumed him. He was determined to appear strong, yet with each passing day, the internal battle grew more intense. He fought not only against enemies, but also against his own fears and doubts. Days turned into weeks, and the war continued to demand its toll. Tom and Clara were confronted with challenges that tested not only the strength of their love, but also their deepest beliefs about what it meant to live in such a chaotic world. And so, their journey continued, filled with uncertainties and the promise that, despite everything, love could be the light that illuminated the darkest paths. Time passed, and the war continued to shape who Tom and Clara were. On the battlefield, Tom faced a brutal reality. What had once been a fight for courage now became a battleground against his own weaknesses. He found himself surrounded by soldiers who, like him, carried the weight of devastating experiences. Each time an explosion echoed, Tom felt his body stiffen, his mind paralyzed by memories of what he had endured. He knew he needed to be strong, but each day felt like a new internal battle, where doubt and fear were his fiercest enemies. Conversations with Mark became increasingly frequent. The sergeant, who had always been a pillar of strength, now presented a source of constant distrust. Listen, Tom, you need to understand that love can be a distraction. What you feel for Clara can make you vulnerable. When you attach yourself, you expose yourself to more pain, Mark would say, his deep voice resonating in Tom's mind. While these words were well-intentioned, they only heightened the conflict within him. Tom wondered if love truly made him weaker, or if, conversely, it was the only thing keeping him alive amid the chaos. Meanwhile, Clara faced her own challenges in the hospital. The nights were long and exhausting, and the faces of the injured overwhelmed her mind, becoming a constant reminder of the war. Each patient that arrived was another reminder of Tom and what was at stake. The weight of responsibility consumed her, and at times she wondered if she could carry on. Helen's words echoed in her mind. Love is a trap, Clara. It can break you when you least expect it. This doubt followed her like a shadow, and she questioned whether she should distance herself from Tom to protect him and herself from the pain that the war could bring. Clara's routine was abruptly interrupted when a new patient arrived at the hospital. He was a young soldier with a severe leg wound and a lost look in his eyes. As she approached, Clara recognized the fragility of life and, at the same time, the strength she needed to face the pain. While treating the soldier, her thoughts were on Tom. If he were here, what would he say? How would he handle this? She pondered. That scene made her realize that she couldn't let fear dominate her. She needed to be strong, not just for Tom, but for everyone around her. On the battlefield, things took an unexpected turn. During a mission, Tom and his companions were ambushed. The deafening sound of gunfire and explosions became a symphony of despair. Amidst the fighting, Tom saw a friend get wounded. Instinctively, he rushed toward him, but the memory of Mark's words hit him hard. You can't let your emotions take over. He hesitated, and in that moment of doubt, his friend was hit again. Guilt and pain consumed him. He couldn't save his friend, and that failure became a scar he would carry forever. In that instant, Tom realized that war affected not only the bodies, but also the souls. The battle was not just against external enemies, but also against his own limitations. He wondered if he could overcome this failure, and if he was still capable of being the hero he longed to be. Meanwhile, Clara received news of the attack. Her heart raced when she heard Tom's name among the wounded. Anguish took hold of her. The fear of losing Tom forced her to confront her insecurities. She felt as if every moment in her life was a roulette, where love and pain danced together in an uncertain step. The pressure made her feel that perhaps love was a weakness, but the idea of losing Tom was unbearable. Days passed, and when Tom finally returned to the hospital, he was visibly shaken. The lost look in his eyes and the dark expression on his face spoke more than words ever could. Clara ran to him, but upon seeing him, she felt Helen's words reverberate in her mind. What followed was a profound silence, where the pain of battle and loss met the hope of reunion. Tom was back, but not as the man Clara had known. He had faced death and suffering, and now the weight of his choices followed him like a shadow. Clara found herself facing a difficult choice: how to support Tom without losing herself. The love that once seemed like a light now felt like a heavy responsibility, and the line between love and pain grew increasingly thin. Both were on a path of self-discovery, confronting not only the challenges of war, but also their own weaknesses and fears. Love could be the light guiding them or the weight pulling them down. Their journey became ever more complex, filled with uncertainties, and the only certainty they had was that the road ahead would be fraught with difficult choices and emotional confrontations. And so the battle for survival, both physical and emotional, continued, challenging them to find strength where there seemed to be none. Tom and Clara were at a critical juncture in their lives, surrounded by uncertainties and fears that felt insurmountable. After Tom's return to the hospital, the tension between them intensified. He was silent, grappling with his memories and the guilt that accompanied him. Clara, in turn, tried to find comforting words, but the pain in her eyes was a constant reminder of what they had both lost. One night, as the sounds of war echoed in the distance, Clara decided it was time to talk. She sat beside Tom, who was staring out the window, the moonlight reflecting on his weary face. "Tom," she began, hesitating, "we need to talk about what happened, about how you're feeling." Tom turned his head, his eyes filled with sorrow. He didn't want to talk, but he knew he had to. "I couldn't save him, Clara. I hesitated, and that cost him his life," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "I should have been quicker, stronger. I should have done more." The words tumbled out in a whirlwind, and as he spoke, tears began to stream down his face. Clara remained silent, her heart aching as she heard the pain and guilt Tom bore. She knew that his internal struggle was fierce, and Mark's words echoed in her mind. "Love can make you vulnerable. Tom, you can't carry this alone," she replied softly. "You're not responsible for everything that happens in war. Doing what's right isn't always easy, and no one can predict what will happen." But Tom wasn't convinced. He felt like a failure, and inside, the weight of loss crushed him. That same night, while Clara tried to comfort him, a new wounded soldier arrived at the hospital. He was a young man, his eyes filled with terror and pain. Upon seeing him, Clara felt a chill in her stomach. The boy was the same age as Tom. As she treated his injuries, Clara found herself reflecting on the fragility of life. The young man's face reminded her of what was at stake, and the pain of war became palpable. In a moment of desperation, the soldier revealed that he had lost his brother in combat. He was struggling to cope with the pain and guilt, feeling powerless for not having been able to save him. As Clara listened to his words, she realized that the pain Tom felt was not unique. It was an experience shared by many. She remembered her own insecurities and how her love for Tom made her fear losing him. But in that moment, she also understood that love wasn't a weakness. It was a collective strength that united people in the face of tragedy. As Clara tried to comfort the young soldier, a new revelation dawned on her. If Tom was struggling with guilt, she should also help to carry some of that burden. Love wasn't a trap, but rather a light illuminating the way, even in the darkest hours. She decided that she couldn't pull away from Tom. He needed her, just as she needed him. The next morning, Clara confronted Tom again. "I've understood something important," she said firmly. "The pain you feel is real, but it's not yours to bear alone. We need each other, Tom. We can't let guilt and fear drive us apart." Tom looked at her, confusion still present in his eyes, but something had shifted. He began to realize that the connection binding them was stronger than the pain of war. Tom finally opened up. "I'm scared, Clara. Scared of failing again. Scared of losing you. The war has changed me, and I don't know if I'm the same person you loved." Tears welled in his eyes, and Clara felt her heart tighten. She moved closer and held his hand. "You're still the same person, Tom. The war may have changed some things, but your heart is still the same. We will get through this together. You don't always have to be strong. Sometimes being vulnerable is true strength," she said with conviction. The conversation marked a turning point. Tom began to understand that vulnerability wasn't a sign of weakness, but of courage. He realized that by opening up to Clara, he was not only allowing her to help him, but also finding a path to healing. It was a new beginning, a chance to rewrite the narrative of his life and love, even amidst the chaos of war. As the battle raged outside, Tom and Clara started to piece together the fragments of their souls. One day at a time. The pain was still there, but now there was hope. The connection they shared became a beacon in the darkness, a reminder that even in wartime, love could offer refuge and a way to overcome. Their journey was far from over, but together, they were ready to face whatever came their way. The conversation between Tom and Clara was a true turning point. In the days that followed, something began to change within Tom. Each morning, upon waking, he felt a slight relief. The pressure that had once crushed him began to ease, even if slowly. Clara was by his side, always ready to offer her support. Her affection had become a balm for his emotional wounds. However, new challenges arose. Tom still suffered from constant nightmares about the war, where he couldn't save his friends. He would wake up gasping, drenched in sweat, and his heart racing. It was a battle he hadn't won, even while awake. Clara noticed these changes, and instead of pulling away, she moved even closer. She would embrace him during these crises, whispering soothing words until he managed to calm down. "I'm here, Tom. You're safe now," she repeated, and those simple words began to create a new safe space between them. The love they shared was becoming a shield against the horrors of the past. But Tom's internal struggle was far from over. He knew he needed to confront the pain, rather than just hide it beneath the surface. The following days were marked by Tom's sincere attempt to reevaluate his life, his decisions, and most importantly, his emotions. One afternoon, while Clara organized supplies at the hospital, Tom decided it was time to take a further step. He joined a support group for veterans dealing with war trauma. The first meeting was difficult for him. He listened to the stories of other soldiers, each with their own tales of loss and pain. Tom felt an immediate connection, but also a growing fear. What if he couldn't speak? What if his words failed to convey what he felt? When it was his turn, he hesitated. He looked at the floor, feeling the weight of the guilt that always seemed to follow him. But then he remembered Clara's words. Sometimes, being vulnerable is true strength. With tremendous effort, he lifted his head and began to speak. His voice trembled, but the words started to flow. He talked about losing his friend, the guilt he felt, and the fear that consumed him. When he finished, he felt a light sense of relief, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. The others in the group listened attentively, and he realized he was not alone. In this process of opening up, Tom began to notice changes within himself. There was a new understanding of his pain, along with a sense that moving forward was possible. However, that didn't mean the challenges had disappeared. In fact, new obstacles had arisen. The memories of war still haunted him, and some nights were tougher than others. At times, he felt as lost as before, as if trapped in a maze with no exit. During one of those vulnerable moments, Tom decided to seek help from a therapist. He knew he needed someone to guide him through this tortuous path. The first session was a new challenge. He entered the office feeling nervous, his hands sweaty and heart racing. But just like at the veterans meeting, Tom found the courage to share his story. Over time, this practice began to help him organize his thoughts, better understand his reactions, and cope with his emotions. Meanwhile, Clara continued to be his safe harbor. One night, as they watched a storm through the window, Tom looked at Clara and realized how important she was to him. "I don't know what I would do without you," he said, sincerity in his voice. Clara smiled, but there was a shadow of concern in her gaze. She knew Tom's journey was still long and full of obstacles. "You don't have to do this alone, Tom. I'm here to support you, but I also want you to know that you're strong enough to face this. You're allowing yourself to feel, and that is already a huge step," Clara replied softly. Tom nodded, but he couldn't shake the pressure of expectation. He wanted to be strong, not just for himself, but for Clara too. Conversations about the war, emotional scars, and the struggle to rediscover himself became more frequent. Every day he fought not to let guilt consume him, but there were moments when the battle felt overwhelming. The support Tom was receiving from Clara, the groups, and the therapist began to bear fruit. He allowed himself to laugh a little more, and the hope for better days started to shine in his mind. Yet, the fragility of life remained a constant reminder. The war had not ended, and challenges continued to arise. Even so, Tom was determined to fight, not just for his life, but for the life he could still build alongside Clara. He knew the road would be full of ups and downs, but finally, he had hope. And that hope was, indeed, the light illuminating his path. Tom was on a journey of self-discovery and healing. Although the fight against his inner demons was ongoing, he began to find strength in unexpected places. With each support group meeting, he not only shared his pain, but also listened to others' stories, helping him realize he wasn't alone. Each story he heard resonated with some part of his own experience, encouraging him to open his heart. With Clara by his side, he learned to trust himself more. Her presence reminded him that vulnerability wasn't weakness, but a vital step toward recovery. Clara not only supported him, but also challenged him to face his fears. In an intimate conversation, she said, "Courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it." These words echoed in Tom's mind, becoming a mantra he repeated to himself during difficult times. He faced his sleepless nights when nightmares would assault him, and memories of war seemed to become more vivid. Instead of being swept away by despair, he began to apply the techniques he learned from his therapist. Breathing deeply, counting to 10, and reminding himself that he was safe now. These small strategies turned into valuable tools in his journey of overcoming. There were days when Tom felt as if he was regressing. The shadows of the past still pursued him, and he questioned whether he could truly overcome his emotional scars. But even on those tough days, a new understanding started to emerge within him. He realized that life wasn't a straight line. There were ups and downs, and everything was part of the healing process. He began to accept that it was normal to have bad days, but that didn't mean he was failing. His idea of success also began to change. He used to associate success with the acquisition of material goods, but now he saw that true wealth lay in how he felt about himself. With each small victory, like managing to sleep through the night without nightmares or having a day when he felt lighter, Tom understood that those moments were precious. He began to celebrate these achievements, no matter how small, recognizing that each step forward was a sign of progress. Over time, the friendship between Tom and Clara evolved. They shared laughter, moments of joy, and tears too. Clara became more than just a partner. She became a loyal friend, someone who challenged him to be better. Together, they explored new activities, like hiking in nature and movie afternoons, creating new memories that replaced the painful recollections of the past. Tom began to apply the lessons he learned in his daily life. He allowed himself to feel, cry, and laugh. He learned to be kind to himself and not to be too hard on himself. When negative thoughts arose, he tried to redirect his mind, focusing on the good things he had in his life. Each time he managed to do this, he felt stronger and more confident. Tom's growth did not go unnoticed. He started to engage more in activities that made him feel good, like volunteering at a veterans shelter. Helping others not only distracted him from his pain, but also gave him a sense of purpose. He realized that by sharing his story and experiences, he was helping others feel less alone in their struggles. When emotional storms still hit him, Tom did not hesitate to seek help. He knew he didn't have to face everything alone. Instead of isolating himself, he surrounded himself with people who cared about him. This support network became essential in his journey of self-discovery. Each passing day, Tom felt more connected to himself and the world around him. He understood that healing was not a destination, but a journey. And although there would be challenges ahead, he now had the tools and support needed to face them. The light of hope shone brighter in his heart, and he was determined to continue his path, always toward growth and overcoming. The morning was cold and cloudy, reflecting the turmoil in Tom's mind. He was about to face one of his greatest battles, a special meeting at the support group, where he would share his life story for the first time. Nervousness consumed him, and he wondered if he was truly strong enough to open his heart in front of strangers. Memories of the war, moments of pain and suffering, all seemed to come rushing back with full force. He could feel the weight of the past on his shoulders, almost like it was pulling him down into the shadows of his former life. Clara, sensing his agitation, held his hand and looked into his eyes. "Remember, Tom, you're not alone. Everyone here is fighting their own battles. Your story might help someone find hope," she said with an encouraging smile. Her words were a balm, and Tom took a deep breath, trying to recall what he had learned about facing his fears. He nodded, determined to turn his fear into courage. As he entered the room, the atmosphere was charged with emotions. The faces around him were familiar, but the feeling of vulnerability enveloped him. When it was his turn to speak, his heart raced. He looked down at the floor, searching for the right words, but his mind was clouded. Memories of the war floated through his mind, and he hesitated. But then, he remembered Clara's presence by his side, the strength she provided him. Taking a deep breath, he began to speak. "My name is Tom," he said, his voice trembling. "I am a veteran, and for a long time, I felt trapped in a cycle of pain and loneliness." He paused, feeling the emotion rise. "The memories of the war haunted me, and I didn't know how to deal with it. I pushed away the people I loved, thinking it would be easier to suffer alone." As he spoke, Tom began to notice the reactions of his audience. Some people were attentive, others had tears in their eyes. He continued, now more confident. "But in the last few months, I've learned that vulnerability is not weakness. I've learned to ask for help and to accept that I don't have to face this alone." He felt an energetic surge, as if the words had a life of their own. Tom shared his struggles, his small victories, and most importantly, the transformation he was undergoing. Each account of overcoming brought him closer to his truth. He spoke about how he had learned to value the small victories and to find joy in the simple things in life. At the end of his story, he realized he was surrounded by a sense of understanding and empathy. The tears that had once been of pain were now of liberation. The room fell silent for a moment, and then someone started to applaud. Tom looked around, surprised, and soon everyone was clapping, expressing support and solidarity. Emotion washed over him, and he felt a wave of gratitude. Clara smiled at him, her eyes shining with pride. After the meeting, several group members approached to congratulate him. They shared their own stories and said how his words resonated with them. Tom realized that by opening up, he had created a genuine connection. He felt part of something greater, a supportive community that embraced him on his healing journey. On the way home, Tom and Clara talked about the experience. "You were amazing," Clara said, holding his hand. "I always knew you had that strength inside you." Tom smiled, feeling an overwhelming sense of relief and satisfaction. He realized that by facing his greatest challenge, he had not only conquered his fears, but also allowed himself to be seen and heard. That night, as he prepared for bed, Tom reflected on his journey. He understood that failing to cope with his feelings had been a crucial part of his learning. Each mistake, each fall, had contributed to his growth. Success was no longer about material achievements, but about how he felt about himself and others. Tom finally grasped that life was a mosaic of experiences, and each piece, good or bad, held its value. He smiled as he recognized that he had become someone who could not only face his demons, but also help others do the same. His friendship with Clara had solidified, becoming a pillar in his life. Together, they were ready to face whatever came their way. with courage and love. With a lighter heart and a calm mind, Tom fell asleep, knowing that the road ahead would be filled with challenges, but also new opportunities. And more importantly, he knew he would never be alone again. The following week, Tom woke up feeling different. The weight he had carried for so long seemed a little lighter. He looked out the window and saw the sun shining, illuminating the world outside. It was as if the light had touched his soul, bringing a new energy. He remembered the meeting and what he had shared. The words still echoed in his mind, not only his but those of everyone there, fighting their own battles. As he prepared for the day, Tom realized that the courage he had found him look at life with fresh eyes. He decided he didn't want to hide anymore. The first thing he did was call his brother, with whom he hadn't spoken in months. The conversation was hesitant at first, but soon turned into laughter and reminiscing. Tom realized that by opening his heart, he was opening doors to relationships he had neglected. Clara was a constant presence in his thoughts. After the meeting, they had grown closer. He invited her for coffee, and as they talked, Tom felt the connection between them solidify. "You know, I never thought I could do this," he said, looking into her eyes. "Talking about my life, about the war, it felt like a weight being lifted off me, and it's all thanks to you." Clara smiled, a glow of understanding in her eyes. "You had that strength inside you all along, Tom. I just helped you find it." Their friendship deepened, and Tom began to feel a shift in his perspective. He signed up to help in the support group, not just as a participant, but as someone who could guide others. In doing so, he realized that by helping others, he was also helping himself. The act of sharing his experiences became a form of therapy, and he felt stronger with each new story he heard. One day, after a particularly touching session, a young man named Lucas approached Tom. "What you said today really touched me. I also lost someone in the war, and for a long time I felt alone. You gave me hope," he confessed, tears in his eyes. Tom smiled, feeling grateful to be a source of inspiration. "You're not alone, Lucas. We're all in this together. We'll get through this together." The words hung between them, creating a bond of solidarity that Tom never imagined he would be capable of forming. As time passed, Tom began to engage in more community activities. He enrolled in an art class, where he could express his emotions in ways that words often couldn't. Painting became a refuge, and his canvases reflected not only his pain but also his hope and rebirth. Art became a new way to connect with himself and others. One night, while at home, Tom received a message from Clara. She invited him to an art exhibition where he could showcase some of his works. The idea of exposing his feelings through art made him nervous, but at the same time, he felt excited. He knew it would be another opportunity to open up and touch someone's life. With her support, Tom decided to take on the challenge. On the night of the exhibition, Tom's heart raced. He saw people admiring his works, and each compliment felt like another step in his healing journey. As he observed the faces of those around him, he felt a deep connection with them. Each person there had their own stories, their own struggles. He realized that it wasn't just him healing, but everyone around him as well. By the end of the night, Clara approached him and said, "You did this, Tom. Look at how much you've grown." He smiled, feeling that he was finally living instead of merely existing. The challenges were still present, but now he had the tools and support necessary to face them. Tom learned that vulnerability was not a sign of weakness, but rather a demonstration of strength. As he walked home that night, Tom reflected on his journey. He had faced his demons, and in doing so, he had found a new purpose. Life was undoubtedly a roller coaster, but now he was ready to enjoy the ride. He knew that regardless of what the future held, he was no longer alone. And that, for him, was the greatest victory of all. Tom had come a long way since that day he chose to confront his fears and open his heart. He not only reconciled with his past, but also discovered a new purpose in life. Through his journey, he found that vulnerability could be a powerful strength. Looking back, he realized that each step he took led him to a place where pain and joy coexisted, where art became a form of expression, and where friendship transformed into a safe harbor. The art exhibition was a significant milestone for him. It wasn't just about showcasing his works, but about sharing a part of himself with the world. He felt that each brushstroke on his canvases was a way of telling his story, conveying his emotions, and connecting with others. The conversations he had that night with people who identified with his experiences were transformative. Tom realized that his struggles, though difficult, could help others find the light at the end of the tunnel. The following weeks were filled with new opportunities. Tom became a mentor for many young people attending the support group, inspiring them to speak about their own experiences. He noticed that helping others not only made him feel better, but also kept him anchored in his own achievements. The feeling of making a difference in someone's life was indescribable and became a constant motivation. Clara had always been by his side, sharing laughter and tears, and their friendship deepened. Together, they explored new hobbies and experiences, like dance classes and nature walks. Tom learned that life wasn't just about facing his demons, but also about celebrating the small joys. One day, while walking in a park, Clara said to Tom, "Do you remember how it all started? How you were lost, and now you're a source of hope for so many." He smiled, acknowledging that, indeed, the transformation of his life was a reflection of his courage and determination. He had learned the importance of taking care of himself and seeking support when needed. Over time, Tom found himself not only healed, but also filled with gratitude. He understood that true wealth wasn't in material possessions, but in the human connections he formed. Success wasn't just about individual achievements, but about creating a positive impact in the lives of others. He felt happier than he ever could have imagined. In a moment of reflection, Tom decided it was time to share his story with a broader audience. He began writing a book about his journey of overcoming challenges, hoping to inspire others facing similar difficulties. He wanted people to know they weren't alone, that pain could be transformed into strength, and that healing was an ongoing process. As he wrote, Tom felt a wave of emotions. He knew his journey wasn't over, but now he faced it with hope and determination. He was ready to confront the future, not just as a survivor, but as a true warrior of life. At the end of his story, Tom invited everyone to reflect on their own journeys. He wanted people to understand that regardless of the challenges, there is always a path to the light. He encouraged everyone to share their own experiences, connect, and seek support. "Every story matters," he said, "and together, we are stronger." If you also have a story of overcoming or know someone who needs inspiration, share it in the comments. Let's create a network of support and hope. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe to the channel. Together, we can spread more messages of hope and transformation. Every interaction helps bring more content like this, and your voice is important.